The bridge. Between worlds, Fiona Blackwood huddled beneath the concrete overhang of West River Bridge, one hand protectively curved around her swollen belly. 7 months pregnant and 3 months homeless. Numbers that defined her existence now. The late autumn rain pattered against the ground just beyond her small shelter, creating a curtain of water that separated her makeshift home from the rest of the world. Just a little longer, little one, she whispered, running her thumb across the stretched fabric of her second-hand sweater. We'll find something better before you arrive. At 24, Fiona had never imagined this would be her life. Before her pregnancy, she'd been working as a teacher's assistant while studying for her education degree. Then came the positive test, followed by her boyfriend Trevor's sudden disappearance and her landlord's eviction notice when she couldn't make rent alone. Her parents, strict conservatives from a small rural town, had made it clear years ago that they wouldn't be her safety net after she'd chosen city life against their wishes. The social worker at the downtown shelter, Mrs. Hernandez, had been trying to find her permanent housing, but the waiting lists stretched for months. Fiona had stayed there until a bedbug infestation forced the shelter to temporarily close 2 weeks ago. Since then, this bridge had been home. Lightning flashed, illuminating the space around her. Fiona counted 1, 2, 3 before thunder crashed overhead. The storm was getting closer. She tucked her few possessions deeper into her backpack to keep them dry, then pulled out the small plastic container of peanut butter and stale crackers that would be her dinner. The screeching of tires cut through the sound of rainfall. Fiona froze mid-bite, listening. A loud crash followed, then silence. Her heart pounding, she crawled to the edge of the overhang and peered out into the storm. About 30 yards away, where the road curved sharply, a sleek black car had slammed into the guardrail. Steam rose from its crumpled hood, mingling with the rain. No other vehicles were in sight, no help coming down the deserted road. "Hello?" Fiona called out, her voice small against the storm. "Is anyone hurt?" "Nothing." She hesitated, one hand on her belly. The smart thing would be to stay dry, to protect herself and her baby. But if someone was injured... Damn it, she muttered, grabbing her worn jacket. Pulling it over her head as meager protection, Fiona ventured into the downpour. The rain immediately soaked through her clothes as she made her way to the wreckage. The car was expensive, some luxury model she couldn't name. Through the driver's side window, she saw a man slumped over the steering wheel, unmoving. "Hey! Can you hear me?" Fiona shouted, tugging at the door handle. It was locked. She looked around frantically, then spotted a chunk of broken concrete from the roadside. Using both hands, she lifted it and smashed it against the passenger window. The glass cracked, then shattered on her third attempt. Reaching through the broken window, she unlocked the door and pulled it open. The interior light revealed a man about her age, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. His expensive suit and perfectly trimmed dark hair seemed jarringly out of place in the chaos of the crash. "Sir, can you wake up?" Fiona checked his pulse, strong and steady. That was something at least. His eyelids fluttered, then opened. Disoriented brown eyes stared back at her. "What happened?" he mumbled. "You crashed your car," Fiona explained, rain streaming down her face. "Can you move? We need to get you somewhere dry." He nodded vaguely, then winced in pain. With Fiona's help, he managed to stumble out of the vehicle. She supported his weight as best she could, guiding him toward her shelter under the bridge. "I'm Damien," he said, voice clearer now despite the gash on his forehead. "Fiona," she replied simply, focusing on the difficult task of helping him walk while balancing her own pregnant body. "My place isn't much, but it's dry." When they reached the overhang, Fiona helped Damien sit against the concrete wall. She dug through her backpack and pulled out a relatively clean t-shirt, using it to dab at the blood on his forehead. "You should call someone," she said. "Do you have a phone?" Damien patted his pockets, then shook his head. "Must have gotten lost in the crash." "Great," Fiona sighed. Her own phone had been sold weeks ago to buy food. "Well, you can wait out the storm here. The road gets busier in the morning." As she continued tending to his wound, Damien's eyes focused more clearly, taking in her pregnant belly, the small pile of belongings, the makeshift bed of flattened cardboard. "You live here?" he asked, his voice careful without judgment. Fiona stiffened. "Temporarily," Damien nodded, then asked quietly, "Why did you help me? You could have been hurt." She met his gaze, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach. "Because we all need someone to care sometimes." Something in his expression changed. A flicker of recognition, perhaps, or understanding. In that moment, as thunder rumbled overhead and rain created their private world beneath the bridge, neither of them could imagine how this chance encounter would forever alter the course of their lives. Ripples of compassion. 3 days had passed since the storm, and Damian Wesley couldn't stop thinking about the pregnant woman under the bridge. After dawn broke that morning, a passing truck driver had stopped to help, calling an ambulance for Damian despite his protests that he was fine. In the chaos of paramedics and police reports, he'd lost track of Fiona, who had quietly disappeared back to her shelter. The concussion had kept him hospitalized overnight. And his father, Harrison Wesley, founder and CEO of Wesley Innovations, had been furious, though more about the destroyed $200,000 car than his son's injuries. "What were you doing on that road anyway?" Harrison had demanded from the doorway of Damian's hospital room, not bothering to sit down. At 48, Harrison maintained the imposing presence that had helped him build a tech empire from scratch. That board meeting was crucial. "I needed time to think," Damian had answered, fingering the bandage on his forehead. He couldn't explain the suffocating feeling that had overcome him during the meeting, the realization that his entire life had been mapped out without his input. Now, seated in his penthouse office overlooking the city skyline, Damian instructed his assistant, Natalie, for the 3rd time that week. "I need you to find her." First name Fiona, probably in her 20s, pregnant, homeless. Last seen at West River Bridge. Natalie nodded, already accustomed to this new obsession. "Mr. Wesley, with all due respect, finding a specific homeless person without a last name is challenging. I've already contacted 3 shelters in that area." "Try harder," Damian insisted, swiveling his chair to face the window. "She saved my life, Natalie." What he didn't say was how her simple act of kindness had shaken him to his core. In his world of strategic philanthropy, where every charitable donation was calculated for maximum tax benefit and publicity, Fiona's selfless act felt almost alien. Meanwhile, Fiona Blackwood was having the worst week of her already difficult pregnancy. The downtown shelter had reopened, but her spot had been filled. The constant rain had soaked through her cardboard bed, and the small community of homeless people who shared the bridge area had warned her about increased police patrols targeting their encampment. "They're doing sweeps tomorrow," cautioned Jerome, an older veteran who sometimes shared his food with her. "Something about beautification before some tech conference?" Fiona nodded gratefully for the warning. "Any ideas where to go?" Jerome scratched his gray beard. "St. Catherine's Church lets people sleep in the basement on cold nights. Sister Beatrice has a soft spot for expectant mothers." That evening, as Fiona gathered her meager possessions, she found herself wondering about the man she'd rescued. Damian. He'd seemed kind, despite his obvious wealth. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to imagine a different reality, one where people like him noticed people like her beyond a momentary crisis. She laughed bitterly at her own fantasy. "Get real, Fiona," she muttered to herself. The walk to St. Catherine's took nearly an hour, her back aching with each step. Upon arrival, Sister Beatrice, a wiry woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, took one look at Fiona's condition and ushered her inside. "When are you due, dear?" she asked, showing Fiona to a cot in the corner of the church basement, where several other homeless individuals were already settling in. "About 8 weeks," Fiona responded, lowering herself gratefully onto the thin mattress. "Though my last prenatal checkup was a while ago, so I'm not entirely sure." Sister Beatrice frowned. "We have a clinic that visits on Thursdays." "You'll see them tomorrow." For the first time in weeks, Fiona slept without the sound of cars overhead or fear of being discovered. She dreamed of the baby, a little girl with her own stubborn chin and curious eyes, living in a home with actual walls and a roof that didn't leak. Across town, Damian sat in his father's study, half listening to Harrison's lecture about responsibility and the future of Wesley innovations. "Your grandfather built this company from nothing," Harrison was saying, swirling amber liquid in a crystal tumbler. "And you nearly threw away your inheritance because you needed to think." His scorn was palpable. "What if I don't want the inheritance?" Damien asked suddenly, surprising himself with the question. Harrison's glass paused midway to his lips. "Excuse me? What if there's more to life than quarterly reports and stock options?" Damien continued, the words flowing now. "What if I want to do something that actually matters?" His father's laugh was cold. "Like what? Join the Peace Corps? Build houses in developing countries? Those are luxuries for people who don't have real responsibilities. Or maybe they're necessities for people who want real purpose," Damien countered. Harrison studied his son with narrowed eyes. "This is about the accident, isn't it? The concussion has you confused." "No," Damien said quietly. "I think it's the first time I've seen clearly." The next morning, Natalie burst into Damien's office, waving a piece of paper. "I found her! A Fiona Blackwood checked into St. Catherine's Church shelter last night. 24 years old, approximately 7 months pregnant." Damien stood so quickly his chair rolled backward and hit the wall. "Are you certain?" "The description matches, and the timing of when she became homeless aligns with when her former employer, Greenfield Elementary, says she stopped coming to work." Within the hour, Damien's car pulled up outside St. Catherine's. He hesitated before entering, suddenly unsure of his purpose. What exactly was he hoping to accomplish? He wasn't even certain Fiona would remember him or want his help. Inside, the church was quiet, sunlight streaming through stained glass windows. Sister Beatrice regarded him suspiciously, his tailored suit marking him as an outsider. "I'm looking for someone," he explained. "Fiona Blackwood." "And you are?" "Someone who owes her a debt of gratitude." Sister Beatrice's expression remained skeptical, but she pointed toward the garden behind the church. "Clinic day! She's waiting to be seen!" Damien found Fiona sitting on a bench beneath a sprawling oak tree, her hands resting on her rounded belly, eyes closed as she tilted her face toward the sun. For a moment he simply watched her, this woman who had risked herself to save a stranger. Then, almost as if sensing his presence, Fiona opened her eyes. Recognition, surprise, and wariness crossed her face in quick succession. "You found me," she said simply. Damien took a step forward. "I wanted to thank you properly." Fiona's lips curved into a small, guarded smile. "You're welcome. Though I'm still not sure why you were looking for me." Before he could answer, a clinic volunteer called Fiona's name. She stood awkwardly, one hand supporting her back. "That's me," she said, then hesitated. "Will you still be here when I'm done?" Damien nodded, suddenly certain of one thing. He wasn't walking away this time. "Yes," he promised. "I'll be right here." Beyond gratitude, the volunteer clinic operated out of a repurposed RV in St. Catherine's back parking lot. Dr. Josephine Walker, a retired obstetrician who dedicated her Thursdays to treating homeless expectant mothers, frowned as she measured Fiona's blood pressure. "Higher than I'd like," she commented, making a note in Fiona's newly created file. "And you're underweight for this stage of pregnancy. How's your nutrition been?" Fiona's gaze dropped to her worn sneakers. "I eat when I can." Dr. Walker's expression softened. "Let's do an ultrasound and see how the little one's doing." Outside, Damien paced beneath the oak tree, phone pressed to his ear. "I don't care what it costs, Patricia. I want options for immediate housing assistance, prenatal care, and employment support programs. Yes, today." Patricia Landry, the director of the Wesley Foundation, the charitable arm of his father's company, sounded exasperated. "Damien, these things take time. We have protocols, application processes, then we change them," he interrupted. "What's the point of having resources if we can't help people when they actually need it?" "This is about that woman who helped you, isn't it?" Patricia's voice had shifted from exasperation to curiosity. "Your father mentioned you've been distracted since the accident." Damien sighed. "Just send me the information, Patricia, please." When Fiona emerged from the clinic 40 minutes later, her expression was troubled. Damien immediately straightened, tucking his phone away. "Everything okay?" he asked. Fiona hesitated, then shook her head. Not really. The baby's measuring small, and I have some warning signs for preeclampsia. She blinked rapidly, fighting tears. Dr. Walker says I need better nutrition, rest, and regular monitoring. She laughed without humor. All things that require money and a stable living situation. Damien took a breath. I might be able to help with that. Fiona's expression immediately hardened. I don't need charity. It's not charity, he countered. It's repayment of a debt. You don't owe me anything. You saved my life. And that means I'm suddenly your responsibility? Fiona's voice rose slightly, drawing glances from nearby volunteers. I don't even know who you are, not really. Damien hesitated, then decided honesty was the only approach. My name is Damien Wesley. My father is Harrison Wesley, founder of Wesley Innovations. Fiona's eyes widened in recognition. Everyone knew Wesley Innovations. The company had revolutionized renewable energy technology and made the Wesley family billions in the process. So you're rich, she said flatly. Yes. And you think throwing money at me solves everything? Damien ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. That's not what I'm doing. Look, can we talk somewhere more private? Maybe get some lunch? Fiona's stomach chose that moment to growl audibly, and she flushed with embarrassment. Fine, she conceded. Lunch, but just to talk. They walked to a small cafe 2 blocks from the church, Damien consciously slowing his pace to match hers. Inside, he noted how Fiona scanned the prices before ordering the cheapest sandwich on the menu, despite his insistence that she choose whatever she wanted. Once seated at a corner table, Damien explained his proposal. The Wesley Foundation has transitional housing for people in emergency situations. It's a small apartment complex downtown, private units, security, support services on site. Fiona looked skeptical. And what's the catch? No catch. It's temporary housing while you get back on your feet. 3 months, with potential extensions based on progress. Progress toward what? Whatever goals you set, Damien explained. Education, employment, permanent housing. The program provides case management to help navigate resources. Fiona's fingers traced the condensation on her water glass. And why would you do this for me specifically? Damien considered his answer carefully. Because when you found me after the accident, you didn't see Damien Wesley, heir to a fortune. You just saw someone who needed help. Do you know how rare that is in my world? Something in his expression must have conveyed his sincerity because Fiona's defenses visibly lowered. I had a life before, she said quietly. A job, an apartment, plans. Then I got pregnant, my boyfriend disappeared, and everything fell apart so fast. What were the plans? Damien asked. I was studying to become a teacher. Early childhood education. Her hand moved to her belly. Ironic, right? Not ironic, Damien countered. Appropriate. You clearly care about children. For the first time, Fiona's smile reached her eyes. I do. I always have. They spent the next hour talking, really talking. Fiona told him about growing up in a strict household where ambition in women was discouraged, her escape to the city for college, and her determination to build a different kind of life. Damien shared his own complicated relationship with his father, the pressure to continue the Wesley legacy, and his growing disillusionment with wealth that didn't serve a greater purpose. By the time they finished eating, something had shifted between them, a fragile trust had formed. I'm not looking for a savior, Fiona said finally. If I accept your help, it's temporary. A stepping stone, not a solution. Damien nodded. I understand. And I'll find a way to pay it back someday. You already have, Damien said simply. 2 days later, Fiona stood in the center of a small but immaculate studio apartment in the Wesley Foundation's transitional housing complex. Sunlight streamed through actual windows, not a bridge underpass. A real bed with clean sheets. A kitchenette with a refrigerator already stocked with groceries. She pressed a hand against her mouth, overwhelmed. Patricia Landry, who had accompanied her for the move-in, reviewed the program details. You'll meet with a case manager weekly. Dr. Walker has arranged for your prenatal care at City Memorial, and there's a stipend for necessities. She handed Fiona a folder of information. Mr. Wesley expedited everything personally. Where is he? Fiona asked, realizing Damien hadn't come along. Board meeting, Patricia explained. But he asked me to give you this. She handed Fiona a small envelope. Inside was a simple note. This isn't charity. It's investment in potential, yours and your child's. Call if you need anything. D.W. Below his signature was a phone number. That night, lying in a real bed for the first time in months, Fiona felt her baby kick strongly. She placed her hand over the movement, tears of relief and uncertainty mingling on her pillow. "We're going to be okay," she whispered, trying to convince herself as much as her unborn child. "But we're doing this on our terms. No one owns us." Across the city, Damien sat in his penthouse, staring at the phone he'd placed on the coffee table. Part of him hoped Fiona would call, even while another part recognized the importance of giving her space. Her fierce independence both frustrated and fascinated him. His father's voice echoed in his mind. Charity is a tax write-off, not a life purpose. For the first time, Damien wondered if his father had always been wrong about that. The birth of new beginnings. 6 weeks passed in a blur of change. For Fiona, each day in stable housing brought improvements to her health and the baby's development. Her blood pressure stabilized, she gained needed weight, and Dr. Walker's concerns about preeclampsia diminished with each checkup. The case manager, Tanisha, helped Fiona apply for emergency assistance programs and explore options for completing her education after the baby arrived. For Damien, the weeks brought a growing rift with his father and a deepening commitment to restructuring the Wesley Foundation. He'd visited Fiona 3 times, brief, somewhat awkward encounters where neither quite knew how to define their relationship. Was he a benefactor, a friend, something else entirely? During his last visit, Fiona had shown him the nursery corner she'd created in her studio, a small bassinet donated by a church group. Second-hand baby clothes organized by size, and a colorful mobile she'd crafted from materials provided by the housing program's arts workshop. "It's not much," she had said, "but it's more than I could have imagined a month ago." Damien had watched her hands lovingly arranging tiny onesies, and felt something shift inside him, a recognition that all the wealth his family possessed meant nothing compared to the care in those simple gestures. Now, at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday in early December, Damien's phone rang, jolting him from sleep. "Hello?" he answered groggily. "Mr. Wesley? This is Tanisha Jenkins from Horizon Housing. Fiona Blackwood has gone into labor and asked us to contact you." Damien was fully awake, instantly. "Which hospital?" "City Memorial. She's been transported by ambulance." 20 minutes later, Damien rushed through the hospital entrance, still wearing sweatpants and a hastily donned sweater. The nurse at the maternity ward desk directed him to the labor and delivery waiting area, explaining that Fiona was in active labor and being evaluated. He paced the empty waiting room, alternating between concern for Fiona and bewilderment at his own intense reaction. Why had she asked for him? What role was he supposed to play here? After an hour, Tanisha arrived, offering a reassuring smile. "She's doing well. Doctor says it might be a while, though. First babies often take their time." "Why did she ask for me?" Damien blurted. Tanisha studied him thoughtfully. "You'd have to ask her that. But if I had to guess, I'd say it's because you're the closest thing to family she has right now." The words hit Damien with unexpected force. Family. The concept had always been complicated for him. His mother had died when he was 12, leaving him with a father who valued achievement over emotional connection. The Wesley name was his identity, but had he ever truly felt like part of a family? Hours passed. Damien called his assistant to cancel the day's meetings. Harrison would be furious, but Damien couldn't bring himself to care. This, being here, felt more important than anything waiting at the office. Around noon, Dr. Walker emerged in scrubs, her expression tired but pleased. "She's asking for you," she told Damien. "Mother and baby are both doing fine." Damien followed her through double doors and down a corridor to a private room, an upgrade he'd quietly arranged through the Wesley Foundation's hospital partnership. Inside, Fiona sat propped against pillows, her face exhausted but radiant as she gazed at the tiny bundle in her arms. She looked up as Damien entered, her smile hesitant but genuine. "You came," she said simply. "Of course," he replied, moving cautiously to the bedside. "I'm honored you asked for me." Fiona adjusted the blanket, revealing a perfect little face with a tuft of dark hair. "Meet Olivia Grace Blackwood." 7 pounds, 2 ounces of pure determination. Damien stared in wonder at the newborn. "She's beautiful. Just like her mother." The words slipped out before he could consider them, but Fiona didn't seem bothered by the compliment. Instead, she asked, "Would you like to hold her?" His hand shook slightly as she transferred the tiny bundle. Olivia squirmed, then settled against his chest, her miniature fingers gripping the edge of her blanket. "I've never held a newborn before," Damien admitted, afraid to move lest he disturb this perfect creature. "You're doing fine," Fiona assured him, watching them with a soft expression. A nurse entered to check Fiona's vitals, and Damien reluctantly returned Olivia to her mother. As the nurse worked, Damien moved toward the window, giving them privacy while trying to process the emotions flooding through him. When they were alone again, Fiona spoke quietly. "Thank you for coming. I know it's strange. We barely know each other." Damien turned back to her. "Why did you ask for me?" Fiona's gaze dropped to Olivia, who had drifted to sleep against her chest. "Because when I pictured this moment during those nights under the bridge, I always imagined being alone. But then you came along and showed me kindness, and suddenly I dared to hope that maybe Olivia and I wouldn't have to face everything alone." She looked up, her expression vulnerable. "I still don't want charity, but I think I'm learning that accepting help isn't the same as being dependent." Damien moved back to her bedside, cautiously sitting on the edge of the chair. "I've been thinking about what you said that first night, about how we all need someone to care sometimes. I think I've spent most of my life avoiding that truth. And now I'm starting to understand what actually matters." He looked at Olivia's peaceful face. "My father called yesterday. He's threatening to remove me from the company board if I don't get my priorities straight." Fiona frowned. "Because of me?" "Because I've been redirecting foundation resources to programs that provide immediate assistance rather than just publicity opportunities." Damien smiled wryly. "Apparently that makes me a bleeding heart who doesn't understand business. And does that bother you?" Damien considered the question honestly. "It would have once. Now, I'm finding I care less about my father's approval and more about whether what I'm doing has real impact, like what you did for me." "That was just the beginning," Damien admitted. "You opened my eyes, Fiona. There's so much more the foundation could be doing if we focused on people instead of optics." As evening fell, nurses came to take Olivia to the nursery for routine tests, promising to bring her back soon. Left alone with Fiona, Damien found himself sharing more about his childhood, his mother's death from cancer, and his complicated relationship with his father's wealth. "He came from nothing," Damien explained. "Built everything from scratch. I think he's always been afraid I'll take it for granted because I never knew struggle. And now you've seen it firsthand," Fiona observed. "Through me." "Yes, but it's not just that." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You showed me something my father never understood. That generosity without connection is meaningless. Writing checks is easy. Being present is what matters." When Olivia returned, fussing slightly, Fiona fed her while Damien stepped out to give them privacy. In the hallway, he called Patricia. "I want to expand the transitional housing program," he said without preamble. "Double the capacity and add childcare services for residents." Patricia sighed. "Your father won't approve the budget." "Then we'll find the money elsewhere," Damien replied. "Starting with my trust fund." Back in Fiona's room, he found her dozing with Olivia nestled against her. Rather than disturb them, he settled into the visitor's chair, watching over them as they slept. Something protective and profound had awakened within him, not just for Fiona and Olivia specifically, but for all they represented: resilience, dignity, the human capacity to care despite circumstance. In that quiet hospital room, as snow began falling gently outside the window, Damien Wesley made a silent promise to the sleeping mother and child. Whatever happened between them, whether friendship or something more, he would use his privilege to create change. not just for them, but inspired by them, and for the first time in his life, the path ahead felt unquestionably right. Full circle 5 years later, the sign on the 3-story brick building read, Blackwood Wesley Children's Center. Inside, sunlight streamed through tall windows into colorful classrooms where children from diverse backgrounds played together under the watchful eyes of trained educators. In the director's office, Fiona Blackwood reviewed the quarterly budget, her hair now cut into a practical bob, her confidence evident in every gesture. The framed diploma on her wall, Bachelor of Education, summa cum laude, had been joined by a master's degree in early childhood development. A soft knock interrupted her concentration. Damien stood in the doorway, his business attire more relaxed than in his corporate days, a button-down shirt and slacks instead of bespoke suits, his dark hair slightly longer than convention dictated. "The board members are here," he said. "And Olivia's class just finished their art project for the presentation," Fiona smiled, standing and smoothing her pencil skirt. "Is she nervous?" "Nervous? Our daughter?" Damien laughed. "She told Mrs. Rodriguez that she's been preparing her whole life for this moment. Our daughter." The word still created a warm glow inside Fiona, even after 3 years of marriage. The journey from that stormy night under the bridge to today had been neither simple nor straightforward, but every step had brought them here, to a partnership built on mutual respect, shared purpose, and eventually, love that had grown naturally from friendship. They walked together down the hallway adorned with children's artwork, their shoulders occasionally brushing. The center, a joint project of Fiona's educational expertise and the reformed Wesley Foundation, provided high-quality early education regardless of families' financial circumstances. Half the spots were reserved for children experiencing housing insecurity or other hardships. "How's your father?" Fiona asked, knowing Harrison's recent heart attack had shaken Damien despite their complicated relationship. "Stubborn as ever," Damien replied. "But I think nearly dying has made him reflective. He actually asked to see the center's latest impact report." "Progress," Fiona noted, squeezing his hand briefly. The relationship between Damien and his father had fractured completely when Damien resigned from Wesley Innovations to focus on humanitarian efforts. Harrison had called it a betrayal of family legacy. Damien had called it the creation of a new one. Reconciliation began slowly after Olivia's 3rd birthday, when Harrison unexpectedly appeared with a gift and an awkward attempt at connection. Now, though still distant, grandfather and granddaughter had established their own cautious relationship. In the community room, board members mingled with staff and families selected to represent the center's success stories. Among them was Jerome, the veteran who had once directed Fiona to St. Catherine's Church. Now sober for 4 years and employed as the center's maintenance supervisor, he greeted them with a warm smile. "The kids are ready," he informed them. "Little Miss Olivia is making sure everyone stands on their marks," Fiona laughed. "Of course she is." The presentation was simple but powerful. Children from the center's various programs performing a song about home, followed by a slideshow documenting the organization's growth over the past 4 years. From one transitional housing complex to a comprehensive network of family support services across the city. At the center of the front row stood Olivia Grace Blackwood Wesley, her dark curls bouncing as she sang with particular enthusiasm. At 5 years old, she embodied the best of both parents, Fiona's determination and compassion, Damien's quick mind and quiet generosity. Afterward, as the adults discussed expansion plans, Olivia tugged on Damien's hand. "Daddy, can I show Mrs. Tanisha my new book?" Damien smiled at the former case manager who now served as the center's family resource coordinator. "Of course, sunshine. Just stay where we can see you." As Olivia chatted animatedly with Tanisha, a young pregnant woman hovering near the refreshment table caught Fiona's attention. She looked barely 20, her expression a familiar mixture of pride and uncertainty that Fiona recognized all too well. "Excuse me," Fiona murmured to the board members, making her way across the room. "First time here?" she asked gently. The young woman nodded. My social worker recommended your prenatal support program. Her hand rested protectively on her slightly rounded belly. I'm not sure I belong, though. Everyone seems so put together, Fiona suggested with a knowing smile. Trust me, none of us have it all figured out. She extended her hand. I'm Fiona Blackwood Wesley, the program director. Zoe Taylor, the woman replied. Her handshake tentative. Well, Zoe, 5 years ago I was homeless, 7 months pregnant, and sleeping under West River Bridge. Fiona watched surprise register on the young woman's face. Someone offered me help when I needed it most, and it changed everything. Across the room, Damien caught her eye, his expression softening as he recognized what was happening. He gave a subtle nod of encouragement. Would you like to hear more about our programs? Fiona asked Zoe. Over tea, perhaps? An hour later, after the board meeting concluded successfully with approval for 3 new satellite locations, Damien found Fiona in her office. Zoe had left with program information and an appointment for prenatal care at the center's clinic. Another life you're changing, Damien observed, leaning against the doorframe. Fiona looked up from her notes. We're changing, together. He crossed to her desk, perching on its edge. Do you ever think about that night? Under the bridge? All the time, Fiona admitted. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if it hadn't been raining, or if I'd stayed dry instead of investigating the crash. I'd probably be exactly where my father always wanted me, Damien mused. Miserable in a corner office making money for money's sake. Fiona stood, moving into the circle of his arms. And I'd probably still be fighting the world alone, convinced that needing help was weakness. Instead, here we are, she echoed. Resting her head against his chest, a small whirlwind burst into the office, Olivia clutching a crayon drawing. Mommy, Daddy! I made this for the new babies. The picture showed 3 stick figures holding hands, one tall with short hair, one medium-sized with curly hair, and one small figure in the middle. Above them, in wobbly letters, everyone Ned's a family. Fiona knelt to her daughter's level. It's beautiful, sweetheart. What made you draw this? Olivia's expression turned serious. Mrs. Tanisha told me about the new mommies who need help, like you needed help before I was born. I want the new babies to know they'll be okay, too. Damien joined them, crouching beside his wife and daughter. That's very thoughtful, Livy. Can we put it on the wall where everyone can see it? Olivia asked hopefully. I think that's a perfect idea, Fiona said, brushing a curl from her daughter's forehead. Right by the entrance, so it's the first thing people see when they come in. Later that evening, as they walked home to their modest brownstone 3 blocks from the center, Olivia skipped ahead, stopping to examine interesting sidewalk cracks and fallen leaves. Damien took Fiona's hand, their fingers intertwining naturally after years of practice. Harrison called before the meeting, he said quietly. He wants to establish a permanent endowment for the center. 10 million, no strings attached. Fiona's eyes widened. What brought this on? Damien shook his head, still processing the conversation himself. He said seeing what we've built made him realize some legacies matter more than others. I think nearly dying has changed his perspective. Does this mean you're reconciling? I'm not sure we'll ever fully understand each other, Damien admitted. But I think we're finally finding respect. They paused at the corner, watching Olivia crouch to examine a ladybug with intense concentration. It's strange, Fiona mused. That night under the bridge, we were both lost in different ways. You in your privilege, me in my pride. And now? She smiled, squeezing his hand. Now we've found something better than either of us imagined. Not just for ourselves, but for her, and for all the others who need what we once needed. Which was, someone who cares, Fiona said simply, echoing the words she'd spoken during that first stormy encounter. We all need that sometimes. As Olivia ran back to them, autumn leaves swirling around her small feet, Damien wrapped his arm around Fiona's shoulders. From an act of kindness on a desperate night to a movement that had transformed hundreds of lives, including their own, full circle indeed.